Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Israel here. Welcome to another live show. I've got a special guest today with me, Jordan from the Yellow Brick Road on YouTube. You can also follow him on Twitter at YellBRo. I've got his Twitter handle up here. What's up, man? How you doing, Jordan?
Doing good, man. Glad to be here.
Sweet, sweet. So, yeah, we were kind of having a pretty interesting discussion about politics and like how disorganized the left is a little bit. So before we get into our stories here, I kind of wanted to just continue that. So I was telling you how the left always seems so divided because our theories were that they're so like intellectually, they're philosophers. They stick to their morals or whatever. Can
hmm
you expand on that a little bit? Like why you think the right is so willing to toe the line sometimes, and the left is kind of disorganized?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Uh, well, you can go several routes with this.
Yeah.
Part of me thinks something to do with religion, like the religious right and the Ronald Reagan era and the rise of, religion and government. Combine them together, and then you have our politics, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, since they have this, faux version
Hmm.
of Christianity. I call it Americanized Christianity.
Oh
They don't
yeah.
have to worry so much about thinking or morals. Everything's written down for them, right? Their answers are given to them. Just lower taxes and, say your Lord's Prayer. That's it. Uh, with the quote unquote Democratic side, I think it's more where you have intellectuals, people that have to figure things out, right? They have to
Right.
figure their morals out. They have to figure out why they want to do certain things.
Right.
I'm like looking at your graphic. It's also a cell phone.
So
But yeah,
okay. So
go
okay.
ahead.
So you're saying like they have to figure. So yeah, like is this why we see like that whole like okay, you got the Bernie Bros here, you got the Tulsi Crats, and you got the
hmm
Yang Gang. And at the beginning of the race, you're like, oh, awesome, we have this coalition of like progressives who are gonna fight back against the establishment. But then you see this craziness, divisiveness happening,
hmm
and you have Bernie people thinking, oh, well, you guys are just going to hurt us. We're obviously the more powerful of the progressive campaigns. So
hmm
why not align and fall in? Which I can sympathize with that, and I can see where that's coming from. And you kind of touched on that. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit? Like how you were saying, like you can see where they're coming from?
Well, I can see where they're coming from in the sense that it's a strategy, right? This is no longer about, you know, it's still about Bernie's policies being pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But if they see someone that can challenge him on a policy level, they see that as competition. And the moral core that got them where they're at in the first place seems to dissolve or disappear for the most part, to where it's like, oh, what are the little flaws of Tulsi Gabbard that I can zoom in on and then
Mm.
start spreading that around and say, Tulsi, you need to drop. You're not going to win anyways. You need to drop out. You don't have the
Right.
same policy as Bernie. Bernie talked about Bolivia before you did. You should drop out.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. Or they'll look at Andrew Yang and they'll say, oh, libertarian Trojan horse because he has UBI. And they'll
Right.
tie it back to Milton Friedman. Like
Right.
this is
Exactly. Yeah.
essentially, yeah, this is essentially them playing mental gymnastics to
Yeah.
make sure Bernie is the outright guy, the outright number one.
Yeah, and you know what? It kind of diverts attention, in my opinion, from the actual establishment candidates, letting them kind of run the field, like a Biden or like a Warren with Bernie
Mhm.
with his, classic, oh, Biden's my friend, I've known him for a long time, we get along, but, with all due respect.
Yeah,
And then, you have obviously indie media who's, trying to push a decent narrative of like pushing back against establishment stuff, but they also kind of fall into that, um, that narrative of like, well, we have to coalesce around somebody. So in order to do that, we have to slash away at, potential ally candidates like the Tulsis and Yangs, and
yeah.
also try to balance, like, juggle the establishment and try to, do stories against them and like point out their flaws.
You
But you're not
you can see
fully,
it.
yeah, you're not fully committed to like anti-establishment candidates because you're
Yeah.
you're you're kind of trying to, cut at both sides, which
Mhm.
eventually ends up hurting you. But all right, so let's get into this first story. Okay, so Mayor Pete has been under like the mainstream media scrutiny lately, which is interesting and surprising to me because the the mainstream media has played this game of like, hey, maybe Harris, huh? Look at Harris,
Yeah,
she's like minority woman, like what's up? And then
yeah,
they played around with Warren, kind of like, oh well, maybe Warren, she's kind of like Bernie, let's hedge our bets there. And then they switched over to Biden, but then Biden's not looking good now, so now they got this young knight, Mayor Pete, but now like there's criticism there. Give me your take on Mayor Pete. Like, what is your feeling about Mayor Pete? Some of the things you've learned doing your stuff.
uh, Pete is through and through a corporate establishment Democratic candidate,
Mm.
100%. Uh, Way back when I first heard about him and like announcing for president, and I looked him up,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm looking at it like short little comments he's made about modern policies that are happening. Like I saw his Syria comments. He's like, we need to stay in Syria, something to that degree. We need to leave ground forces there, or we need to leave air support there. And
Right.
I'm like, then I heard his comments about Venezuela, and it's like, oh, Maduro must go. What is this?
Yeah.
Are you supporting a coup in Venezuela? And it's just I just knew from the jump. And even worse, probably the worst of all is all the initial policies I've heard of him.
Mm-hmm.
The worst was Israel Palestine,
Ooh, yeah,
where
that
he,
was a bad one.
where he falls on Israel Palestine. I mean, it essentially mirrored like a neocon's policy towards Israel Palestine. A lot like I think Elizabeth Warren's as well does that.
Well, now
It's
we see Mayor Pete, his background kind of being exposed, where he worked at McKinley or McKinsey,
McKenzie,
some
yeah.
kind of like corporate management firm or something.
Hmm.
And so people are starting to peel back like the veil and seeing, oh, he's kind of like you said, he's kind of a centrist, the establishment type who, when asked hard questions, he just crumbles, to the pressure.
He's Biden. He,
He
he's
he
he's a young
yeah,
Biden.
he's a little young Biden, little
Yeah.
boy. And like I saw that clip that kind of went viral on Twitter where some guy was like asking him, "Hey, do you support like getting money out of politics and like big fundraising stuff?" And then when he was asked again, like, "Will you stop doing that?" He just straight up was like, "Nope, nope, no, I'm gonna keep doing it." So
I
it's
was
like,
actually just watching a clip from The Hill talking about that, and
yeah,
they're like, uh, they're making some sort of distinction between like these big fundraising, donor dinners and bundlers.
mm,
Now, I'm not a political expert, what I understand is that bundlers are basically the same as someone individually giving donations. They just bundle them together. Am I getting that right?
I think so, yeah. So there's like super PACs, bundling. There's
Yeah.
like, yeah, like the PACs are supposed to be the worst because it's unlimited money. So these PACs
Yeah.
can raise unlimited money to, push your campaign's ideas. And supposedly there's supposed to be like a thin line where it's like, well, you can't talk to the PAC, but it's like, come on, man. Like human nature, like you're not gonna prevent that from happening.
Yeah. So he basically found a way to, you know, he can essentially carry the progressive light by saying, I don't take this type of money by hiding it through these bundlers. And
Right.
it's like, wow. Like
Yeah. It's
that's typical establishment behavior. He's just like another Joe Biden. The media will mask him and hide him. He'll hide himself by not answering questions. That's just like Joe Biden.
Yeah, there's really no difference between the two. Now, Mayor Pete started off very progressive, right? He got a lot of attention because he was supposed to be like a younger Bernie. He was actually very defensive on Twitter when people would go after him, and he'd say, "No, I stand for Medicare for all. I will defend it." And people kind of like, "Oh, okay, let's pay attention a little bit to this guy." And then you saw him as the debates carried on and as time went on, he shifted hard to the center. And we see this with a lot of candidates, but with Pete in specific, to me, it was more like he was getting back to what he naturally is. Because if we look at his record in South Bend, Indiana, that's how he governed as a mayor or whatever. That's how he operated.
Yeah.
I mean,
Uh,
yeah. Go ahead.
uh, you know, like I said, not a political expert, but what I went off of was straight up my intuitive sense of things.
Hmm.
I'll hear him like I said, those initial policies I heard him talk about, and I would just intuitively say, no, this dude isn't for single payer healthcare.
Right, like the
At
way he
best,
carried himself.
yeah, at best you're gonna get maybe a public option, but he might bow down on that one as well, just like Obama did,
Yeah.
right?
In fact, it's funny that you bring up Obama because the media was comparing him to Obama. Like he's like the
Yeah.
Obama of 2020.
Hmm.
Um, he's young, he's charismatic, and all these fluff stories about him and like his campaign and how it might be another Obama when he has 0% support from the black community.
Yeah.
So how you make that comparison as a mainstream outlet is beyond me. Well, I kind of know why, right? The mainstream media obviously has their bias and narrative that they
Yep.
refuse to point out to its consumers because why? I don't know. Like, they just want to be misleading, or I don't know if they just want to be,
It
portrayed as like fake news.
Actually, some of it might be like the way he talks, why they compare him to Obama. Like just saying, like the
Yeah.
clear, like he's very, well-spoken type of guy. When something's thrown at him, at least like the way they cover him, they
Yeah.
show him like not getting flustered or something like that. They're probably turning on him now, but their initial showing of him is this well-spoken guy who's a Rhodes Scholar and he's smart. Trust him.
Right.
Look at his degrees. He's smart. You can trust him as president. Look at Trump. Trump's big and scary, and he says crazy shit.
Yeah. Like,
Here's Mayor Pete. He's calm and he's clean, and he
what
speaks not well.
what do they call it? A return to normalcy? Yeah, that's.
Yeah,
Oh, most voters want just a return to normalcy, and Biden and Buttigieg are going to bring that to us.
yeah.
It's like, geez. Now, what do you make of them not covering? Like, what is your like theory as far as like why the media blacks out certain candidates like Tulsi, Yang, and Sanders? Like what's behind that?
Well, they don't want them there. That's first and foremost. They don't want, like I said, I look at these candidates, I try to bring my ideas, my philosophical ideas with me when I'm talking about politics. And I look at someone who, like, oh, this person might have some form of integrity or they might mean well. So when they see a Yang, Bernie, Tulsi, they're like, okay, these guys are going to get in the way of business. They're
Right.
in the way of business. And I mean, obviously it's stupid, but I guess they're stupid, right? It's a stupid thing to do, but I guess they're stupid.
Well, this is one
'Cause-
thing that I would caution Bernie supporters, because I don't think I've asked you this, but who do you back here in this election? Who best represents your ideas, your philosophy, and kind of what you would like to see?
Well, this might scare the audience, but I don't support any of them like that. I look at them as people, as barometers of what the people of America are feeling.
Okay.
So when I see someone like Obama getting elected in 2008, that's me recognizing that, okay, the populace wants change. When I see people supporting Bernie Sanders in 2016, I'm like, oh, they don't want the same old corporate shit anymore. They want to see real change. They want to do the work to help everybody out.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at Bernie fans, Tulsi fans, Yang fans, you can even say Williamson,
Mm-hmm.
some Elizabeth Warren fans, like they actually, like, okay, the populace wants change.
So
Like,
you remove yourself from the candidate, and so you're more critical of the candidate, despite maybe agreeing with some of their policies. Is that kind of what I'm getting?
well, I put it this way, like I'll say this on my own channel.
Mm-hmm.
What I want the political landscape, I want it to be based on ideas, not particular politicians, not people. Put
Right.
the onus on people, so or on ideas. I mean, so when Tulsi speaks about her foreign policy, and I'm like, wow, no one else is saying that. Those ideas should be represented somewhere in this discussion about president. When Bernie talks about his domestic policy, Medicare for all, forgiving medical debt, college student debt, free college, that should be represented. When Andrew Yang talks about UBI and even like his what do you call it, like freedom dollars or some shit like that.
Freedom dividend.
No. That's the UBI. The
Oh,
the one
oh,
about
democracy
campaign
dollars.
democracy dollars. There you go.
Yeah,
Something like that. Like, oh, those sound like interesting ideas that with, the right
right.
intention could be used for good. So I want those type of guys up there. I want them speaking about the ideas, but the most important thing should be the ideas. I don't want people, fanboying for this candidate or that candidate. That gets in the way. And as you
Yeah.
can see, we're seeing the results of that, of the fanboying, right?
Yeah, no, yeah,
We
I definitely agree. And full honesty, like I do have my bias with Tulsi Gabbard, so I do want to be transparent about that.
and
And I
I
and I can see
understand
where
that.
you're coming from, but um, it's a good point that you bring up about the ideas, right? Because a lot of people are skeptical about these debates and how they're like more of a showman type of process where these candidates get like an insanely short amount of time to put out like these big ideas that require like
Hmm.
literally like hours and hours to break down and really get a clear sense of what this could mean for the public, for society.
Yeah.
So can you kind of touch on that as far as like the debate style, because this kind of leads to our next story with Tosi and Yang.
Uh, the debates are essentially trash and not not much other than like blood sport. Like I'll go there waiting for Tulsi Gabbard to kneecap someone. Like that's like like that's enjoyable to me. Like, oh, who's she
Right.
gonna call out tonight?
Yeah.
But as far as like getting full length policy, as much as I have problems with Joe Rogan, like his platform would be better than NBC or CNN's
Yeah.
2 hour debates where they get 2 minutes each to answer these intricate questions.
Yeah,
Really.
definitely the podcasts are definitely a little bit better. I think with Joe Rogan, he kind of leads the guest a little bit. You know what I mean? Or he kind of like I've heard people say, "Oh, Joe Rogan," or shifty Joe Rogan, where it's like just whoever's in front of him, that's kind of who you're gonna get, like that version of Joe Rogan. So if it's
Yeah.
more of a libertarian type of character, you're gonna get Joe Rogan libertarian. If it's more of a like Bernie type of character, you're gonna get well, of course, education should be free and for all. So I've heard that about Joe Rogan, and I think he just facilitates. So he enjoys facilitating and exposing the real ideas of who's in front of him.
Yeah.
But maybe that's giving him too much credit. What do you think?
Well, Rogan calls it a conversation, but it's not really a conversation. It's essentially a platform for the other person to go there and basically say their ideas without any type of pushback.
Right.
And, I guess it works for him. I'll
Yeah,
just leave it at that.
definitely. So okay, so what would you like to see? Because there have been these town halls. Are you more keen on the town halls, or like there's been the environmental town halls, or there's been like you
Hmm.
know like different versions of town halls where the candidates will speak about one specific issue, and you get to kind of hear them out a little bit more, like within an hour. I think they're usually an
Yeah.
hour for each candidate. Do you like that version better?
Uh, I would. I mean, I want to see them, contrasted against each other. I'd rather have them in a longer discussion, but strictly on one topic. Have them all in the same room,
Mm.
and you don't just give them, 1 or 2 minutes and then shift
You
the
see that in
topic.
Europe, don't you? You see that in Europe a little bit more.
I'm not sure. I'm
I
not
think
sure.
I mean, I know that Europe has, well, they have the parliamentary system and all of that. Some of them
Yeah.
have ranked choice voting. Um, so they have I think they have like a better lead on like the democratic process than we do, to be honest, in my
Yeah.
opinion, at least. But anyways, yeah, I mean, I agree with you on most of those points. Definitely facilitation of ideas is where you want to go, where people
Yeah.
are breaking down, like, for example, you follow? Do you follow like this whole Medicare situation and what people are saying about Medicare for all?
What do you mean exactly?
Well,
Like,
there's obviously the establishment narrative of like how you're gonna pay for it.
okay.
There's the
Yeah.
Bernie narrative of like, well, we're able to pay for endless wars, so why not? And, all these other modern countries have it.
Yeah.
Um, so I kind of wanted to get into that a little bit before we talk about the coming debate and the rigging and all that.
Okay.
So okay, so the way I come at it, right, and I'll try to like frame this in a philosophical, form so that we can kind of dive into it a little bit.
Okay.
Um, but obviously, right, it's there's a morality behind it. Would you agree?
Yes.
The morality being that when you commodify people's health, it's going to lead to external social um, impacts. So like across different avenues of society, for whatever, however you want to put it.
Yeah.
One of those, or one of the big results of that is the fact that people are strapped with this like medical debt,
Yes.
that for one makes them an unhealthier worker. Because I like putting things in business perspective, just because my mind's a bit more conservative, and I have conservative friends, so I like to do that exercise in my mind so that I can frame it to them in a way where perhaps conservatives can get on board.
Mm.
And the way I look at it is, look, if you really want to conserve the Americana stuff, like you were talking about, like this American Christianity stuff,
Yeah.
if you're a conservative, if you really want to conserve that, unhealthy people are going to be more desperate. So they're going to do more desperate things. So they're
Yep.
not going to have morality and ethics that adhere to your Christian values and what version of America you want to see, because they're putting those things on the back seat. Their first, initial thoughts are survival. What do I
Hmm.
need to do to put food on the table? So this leads people to immoral, unethical behaviors, specifically in the business world, and the commodification and the perversion of labor and all of this stuff, because desperation leads to those kinds of things. That's kind of the sense that I take, and that's my philosophical and moral compass, I guess, when it comes to this universal healthcare situation.
Okay.
Why don't you give me your breakdown?
All right. So, well, you sort of went into like the sort of like zeitgeist. Like, you ever heard of that? The
Yeah, yeah,
zeitgeist movement, to
yes.
where it's like, oh, if there's, less poverty, there's less crime, and on and on. Uh, I partially agree with that in the sense of people being conditioned by their surroundings, by their environment, of, the only way to get a, loaf of bread because I don't have any money is to steal it. I understand that. Psychologically, I understand it. But the real work that I believe is going to get woo woo, that needs to be done for any of these policies, healthcare, ending wars, things like that, it takes an individual doing their existential work to understand like who they are, what they are, and their morality. What are their principles? You understand that, and it translates into all political topics. So then, when you start talking about healthcare, it's like, well, yeah, we should make sure everyone's taken care of because I want to care for my neighbor. That's the reason for healthcare. That's the moral reason for health because I want everyone to be okay. I don't want them to suffer. That's the moral reason for this.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but it's tough because when you get into politics, sometimes people lose that aim. Like when I listen to Kyle Kalinske and I hear him talking about like we got to elect Bernie, Medicare for all. We need free college, all that stuff. What I'm hearing is like, oh, okay, Kyle has a moral compass, and his moral compass says like, why are we gonna when we can help everyone? Why not just help them? That's
Right,
the argument I hear when I hear Kyle talk about Bernie's policies or why he likes Bernie, and
right,
that's the core thing that we should sort of be like aiming at. I just think we got a couple degrees separated in regards to politics, right?
right.
I mean, I don't know. I don't even know if
No,
that
that's it.
answered your
Well, no,
question.
that no, that's a good point that you bring up, because oftentimes, in my opinion, right, um, your moral compass, your morality, your values, or whatever,
Hmm.
they tend, because politics is such a different beast. I know you're just starting to get familiar with that, right? And you're kind of noticing that it's a different animal, man. When you're operating
Hold
in the
on, hold on,
political
hold on
world,
there,
and
hold on there, because I might. When I look at politics,
mm-hmm.
the core essence of it is supposed to be like, how do we make our lives better, right? Essentially,
Well, yeah,
like
but
how
there's
do
concessions. Like there's,
good?
well, I was just gonna say, because there's concessions, and it's I don't want to say it's a game, but I can't think of another word for it, because you have different oppositions, people bringing in different perspectives, different moralities, different you know
Yeah.
value systems, and we live in that kind of muddled society where there's not clans, but there's different offsets of society that need different and require different solutions. So you have to come together, work out certain situations, and you
Hmm.
know, the end result doesn't always, like, there's a saying or something where it's like, you can, like, you can please one group, or you can't always please anybody or whatever. It's like someone's always gonna, it's guaranteed that someone's gonna be left out, like someone's gonna be upset,
Yeah.
with whatever the end result is. So that's what I'm saying. Whereas like people's morality and stuff, it's so singular, it's so final almost. It's so like, well, what are you talking about? Like this is how it should be.
Yeah.
So when you bring that into politics, in my opinion, at least, it can be blinding.
I understand that, but at the same time, I don't know, if I had God's power and I ran to every human in North America and I said, if you right now, if you snap your finger, you can give everyone will be healthy for the rest of their lives. I think 99% of people would say, yeah, okay, I'll do that.
Mm.
That means that core thing, that core. Sorry, James said something. That core thing, that core morality is
Yeah.
something that I believe is somewhat, I would say, is universal. I think it's inherent within people, but that goes off into woo-woo,
Yeah.
magical, spiritual land.
No, that's
You know,
fine. I mean, we can totally go there too. But okay. So yeah, I guess I can see that. But at the same time, I also see like the gun situation, right?
yeah,
People there. I mean, there's two distinct groups there that you can obviously see is, well, these are my rights. I want to protect my family, and
hmm
then the betterment of society. Like, but then like you said, there is this like everybody would agree. Well, yeah, we got to make sure that bad people don't get guns.
yeah.
But then they split off. So I can, like, I try to understand that, but at the same time, I don't know, like, to be honest, why that happens. Like, there, to me, like, the answer still evades me as far as like why there's a 90 some approval for universal background checks and this
Yeah.
moral idea of like ensuring the safety of all society, but then it splits into two groups of gun rights versus taking away guns.
Well, it sounds like two opposing groups that essentially agree on the main idea of what they actually want, what they want the world to look like. They just have, two different, modes of how to get there. And what happens is these guys who I don't trust, I call them corporate establishment politicians
Mm-hmm.
who aren't really in this like like we are. They're not on the political spectrum. I think they're on the spectrum of, corruption, something over there. They're not really, these things they claim to be on the surface. So they're
Mm-hmm.
not really on the political spectrum, which is why
Right.
they can, get us to fight each other about these ideas and it ends up sustaining them, right? I mean, like I was telling you before we went live about conspiracy theories, how much, all that stuff I looked into.
Yeah.
And there's an idea that's still prevalent today, and that's like two sides of the same coin. These guys will pretend they're really arguing with each other about these minute ideas, and
Mm-hmm.
they get the populace to argue with each other about it, even though the populace probably at the core agree on what they want to happen.
Right.
Right? We don't want people shooting things up, but we also want people to be able to own guns. Even though, like, we want responsible people to be able to own guns,
Right.
and but at the same time, we don't want any more mass shootings. It's like I bet both sides agree on that. Deep down at the core, they both like, okay,
So
that
to
sounds like
me,
a
it seems, and I don't mind. I don't want to seem like I'm prying or trying to pin you down to one thing.
mhm.
But to me, it seems like you feel like politics is more of it intervenes a lot of times. Like it's like it intervenes in the issues of like morality and like where we should be discussing, which is more philosophical moral issues, and putting those on the table. And because we tend to coalesce around those, it's just
Mhm.
that politics comes in and like interjects. Is that kind of where you're coming from, or I'm just
I
trying to get a
don't,
solid idea.
yeah, I don't think politics does that. I think people in politics do that.
Mm,
I think the true purpose of politics is that, like, how do we okay, we all have a shared idea of this moral idea, right?
yeah.
And politics is just like, okay, how do we get to that idea? But the problem is we have people who are not looking out for the best ideas. They have some sort of other interest or some sort of other, like some other motive, right? They're not doing it for the sake of we're trying to fulfill this moral idea. Like, no, 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 no. They're doing it for they're getting paid to do this or whatever. That's sort of what I'm saying. So I don't think
Okay.
politics is in the way. I just think these corrupt guys are in the way of what politics is really supposed to be.
Sort of the co-opting of politics to
Yes.
right. Okay, perfect. Which is great because it speaks to the corruption aspect of politics, right?
Yeah.
Because we have a two-party system,
Hmm.
which in my opinion from the just from that aspect alone, there's going to be problems.
Yes.
When you're given the what is it called, the best of two options or the lesser
Yeah.
of two evils,
Yeah.
right? That dynamic. So and then you have so much control within those two parties. For example, like this story about Tulsi Gabbard and the qualifying and Andrew Yang and the qualifying polls, and people wondering and dare I say conspiring about like what's behind this, like who is the DNC partnered with for these polling agencies. They're private
Yeah.
entities, they're businesses. What is
Yeah.
their incentives? Who backs them? Who funds them? These are questions that should be asked, in my opinion,
Yes.
and are often glossed over as like, oh well, Quinnipiac or whatever, or YouGov, just yeah, these are staples. Like we should trust them blindly, and not. So let's kind of get into that a little bit because as we know, Tulsi Gabbard, she's like one poll away from the qualifying, but there was a poll that came out in South Carolina that qualified her, but all of a sudden the DNC is like, well, we're not recognizing that poll or whatever anymore. And
Hmm.
then they got a bunch of pushback because it was going to be an all white debate stage,
Yep.
with all the candidates just being like the white candidates. And so like there was a lot of pushback there, and so now they're kind of being a little bit more lenient with at least with Andrew Yang to kind of get Yang on there. And I think there's a little bit of breaking news about him that I saw before we went live that he is going to qualify for the debate come tomorrow.
Yep.
So I mean, that what do you think of that whole thing? What part of that kind of interests you the most?
Uh, well, like I said, I like to pay attention to what the populace is thinking, not just like what's going on in politics, but how people feel about what's happening in politics. And what I just hope it's a reminder to normal people, like, oh, this can happen to your favorite candidate, to where the media ostracizes her, even the indie media to some degree ostracizes her. Not all of it, obviously,
Right.
but it's like man, a normal person must sit back and think like, are these guys working together to keep this person away? If they are, why are they doing this?
Right.
Okay, what's their ideas? Oh, it's specifically about the military industrial complex. Now it's like, you know,
Right.
it's it
Well, what's funny too is like someone was bringing this up in the live chat. How I never knew this about Anderson Cooper from CNN, but he was
yeah.
actually ex CIA.
Yes, I have heard that. I have
So
heard that.
and like optically, man, even if like there's like no like foul play there, just the optics of that
Yeah.
already off the gate just uh, get the whole like conspiracy theory mind going. Of
Well, people
like
know
the
about
intelligence
what is it?
agencies.
Yeah, people know about like what is it, Operation Mockingbird or something,
Yeah.
to where the CIA infiltrating news media
Yeah,
and
there's
using
like
it for
people who write
propaganda.
op-eds and stuff.
Yeah,
And
it's
and what sucks is like a lot of the staple in indie media, like your Sam Cedars and all that, and the Michael Brooks show and all of them, which I
yep.
despise. They just they pull their stuff from mainstream media. You know, they
Yep.
trust like the Intercept. They trust, like Washington Post articles, New York Times articles, and stuff like that. Instead of like critically looking at it and telling their audience like, well, people are skeptical because X, Y, and Z are part of it or fund it, or the writer, he has a history of like just pushing intelligence media stuff or intelligence agency stuff, and that goes
Yeah.
into the conspiracy of it all, right?
Yeah. And part of me, like, I talked to James about this. Like, a lot of these guys, they made their, like, their, I guess, progressive credit
Yeah,
a lot through, like, if you think about the George Bush era and all that, like,
right.
that was when Rachel Maddow and, like, Keith Olbermann, those guys became super famous because they were pushing back against George Bush, right?
Yeah, that's
Then
right.
and they basically fell asleep for Obama. And then Trump comes in, and then they're somehow reignited. Now it's like, wait a minute, I have a pretty good sample size of you individuals now. And it's like, what is this? Is this some sort of team game you're playing or
Well,
something like that?
yeah, it makes you
So
kind of wonder because, like, I think it's just like, what do they call it? Group thinking happening, where
yeah,
it's like, oh, this one channel does a story on this, so like this one follows along, or it
yeah,
just all kind of happens simultaneously.
and and I said that because you start seeing this in the quote unquote indie media when
Right.
you see the Sam Cedars, Michael Brooks, Humanist Report, TYT, Benjamin Dixon. You see these guys all say Tulsi drop out,
The same thing,
or
right? The same narrative.
it's like, are you guys like calling each other late at night and saying, "Hey, we're gonna sell this narrative now"?
Right.
Well, then
It's like
like
the
what?
same effect. Sorry, the same effect that they accuse the mainstream media of doing, they
Exactly,
do themselves.
exactly.
So, which is sad because you want to have some kind of check on mainstream media because they've kind of become the guard dogs
Hmm.
of the establishment and the elites, and kind of
Yeah,
the intelligentsia, bubble.
yeah.
So, but yeah, you're kind of seeing that effect as well.
But
Um,
hold on. It's like, guys, the establishment isn't just the Democratic Party or the DNC. It's the media that propped them up in selling their stories for all this time. If you don't understand that you need a media source with integrity to be the leading voice for when you feel your guy Bernie is going to roll into office.
right,
It's like, if you don't understand that, it's like, it's pathological. That's why I call them pathological.
right, yeah, no, and that makes a lot of sense. Um, I just wish that the biggest frustration that I have when it comes to this whole circus is the fact that the democratic process is supposed to be, hey, these early states decide, who really is worthy of moving on.
Hmm.
But what we're seeing now is, no, before we even get to that beginning stage, it's the mainstream media and the talking heads that are whittling down the field when it's like, you're not even fucking giving democracy a chance at all. That's not democratic at all. You guys get to fucking decide, oh, these candidates aren't worthy because we're the, intelligent people who are giving you guys all this information before we
Yeah.
even cast one single vote.
Yeah. That's why I'd say they're not on the political spectrum, right? If politics is supposed to be about ideas that push the collective forward, they're not about that. They serve a different interest. Thus, I don't put them on the political spectrum at all.
Right. Now, are you okay? So, can you are you familiar with like the corporate aspect to this? Because, in my opinion, again, thinking business wise, right? Because I always try to pull in some kind of business aspect to this, right? There are
Hmm.
business incentives, profit margins. There's money involved in this process, right? I can kind of smell it, like, So I think that contributes a lot to the motivation of these news outlets, the Washington D.C., um, the special interest groups who are involved in
Yeah.
this, pushing this idea, whittling this down, and the narratives. So in my opinion, the way I look at it is, for one, we know corporate media, right? Corporate media is because they're businesses. They have
Yeah,
uh, they have people who fund them through advertising. We know that it's like Raytheon, Halliburton,
yeah,
Boeing, all these military industrial complex intelligence agencies, people, um, and people with money like Steyer, the billionaire. He pushed out like billions or millions of dollars in like an ad push. So
yeah,
and it's like, oh, he's polling at 6% now, and like Bloomberg jumped in the race. All of a sudden, he's polling at
yeah,
6%.
yeah,
It's like, but they have no concrete like grassroots support behind them. Nobody is donating to their campaigns, and they're all about like, well, we're self funding our. Yeah, no shit, you're self funding your campaign. Nobody's gonna fucking give you money. But all of a sudden, like the mainstream media is just pushing these people out there because they have a monetary incentive to keep the world the way it is for them.
yeah,
So, forget about any philosophical debates, forget about any like actually putting the ideas forward before even pushing candidates, and talking about the ideas that they're putting out there and debating how they impact society, and exposing who's being funded by who, what special interest groups are trying to push you this way or that way. Forget about all that. No, it's all about the horse race. It's all about who these talking heads like. That's
yep,
really what pisses me off, because I mean it's the finance of it. It's just the gross hyper capitalist
yeah.
game.
Part of me thinks like when you were talking about the polling, like Bloomberg and Steyer, somehow, no idea how the fuck they get a 5 or 6% or whatever, and it's like I'm like curious. It just has a little theory in my mind. Are they just walking around looking for 60-plus-year-old people and ask them like they hold a chart up to them like, what name do you recognize? Like, I heard of Bloomberg. All right, that's a vote for Bloomberg, and then they move
Boom.
on and shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I picture like the like the old school like 50s people like with the hats and stuff. Like, yeah, let's go over to the the old folks home. What do you think of Bloomberg? Bloomberg. It's just like, what the hell is going on? And if you go on CNN and watch even an hour of CNN, they'll be like fucking kissing their asses and stuff. Like, there's so
Yeah,
much harsh words being thrown at Bloomberg. Well, I say, Mr. Bloomberg, I welcome you to this race. I welcome you. It's like, just kiss that Bloomberg butt, man. You know?
oh my God, did you see the Chuck Todd when Bloomberg announced, or
Yeah.
and Chuck Todd, like, oh my God,
He was
what
just
they call it, like a
fawning over
perfect
him.
balance of something?
Yeah, like the perfect balance of I forget, but he was just basically saying of like change, but also like a return to normalcy, and like a counter to Trump, because they're both billionaires, so the
Yeah,
Democrats need their billionaires so that they can like, and it's like, fucking stop, man.
that only works on people that only watch those channels,
Yeah, because
and their
there's like,
average viewer's age is like 65-plus years old.
and if you think about it, they're the ones who vote. They're really the ones who
Yeah,
shape our policies and stuff, because they're the ones who put in, the people that make those
yeah.
decisions.
I mean, well, for now, I think the young people are starting to like they're going to be very politically active in this election. I truly believe so.
Yeah, well, when you have corporations, splitting hairs to make money, like Disney Plus now charging you, Hulu now charging you,
Yeah,
because we the young people were like venturing off to like this free like exchange online, and now
yeah,
they're corrupting that also. What else are we gonna do? We're gonna try to fucking watch like YouTube and stuff, but now YouTube's trying to charge you fucking an arm and leg. So it's like, that's why we don't watch those kind of cable things, because for one, we couldn't afford cable. So thank you,
yeah,
fucking 2008 economic crisis, for that.
yeah,
And then the Zoomers are being co-opted. The fucking younger like teens now are like kind
yeah.
of, to me, they're kind of behaving like boomers a little bit, but I still have hope for them, because there's still like people who are pretty progressive in that age range. But even if they're conservative, I would hope that they, also are skeptical of the neocons.
Oh, I believe they are. Like I've been paying attention to like dudes that people would probably call like anti-Semitic or racist or alt-right or whatever the hell. Like
Hmm.
this dude Nick Fuentes.
Yeah.
Like Like that dude's like starting like a movement. I don't think it's going to get that large, but it's still like a
No, but
force.
and what I hope that that does is that because I like the fact that they have a nationalist streak in a sense and non-interventionist
Mhm.
interventionist streak in that.
Yeah,
Obviously deplorable. There are certain ideas that I fucking condemn or whatever, but at least they're not buying the bullshit of the fucking Charlie Kirks and the
yeah.
Tommy Lawrence and all of that who push like this like, oh well, nothing's wrong here, like business as usual stuff, like. And then those people, like, they hold on to this like social justice warrior, anti-social justice warrior like streak that, yeah, it's gonna be popular with people because who really is gonna support the crybaby who just wants his safe space and stuff? Nobody, right?
Yeah,
So it's an
yeah,
easy like thing to hammer at. But it's a lot harder to, like, yeah, point out like the actual bullshit that's going on. And I think that that streak of like the right wingers, despite them being accused by like the neo progressives and the Sam Cedar world of being like, oh,
yeah.
you should fear them because they're blah blah blah. It's like, no, even if they
Cedar's an
hold those
idiot.
ideas, they're so fucking easy to tear down. It's fucking low hanging
Yeah.
fruit to go after a fucking Nazi. Um, how would you change the world to look the way you want to? How are we going to transport the blacks and the browns? How much is it going to cost?
Yeah.
How do we tear down the Constitution? What is going to replace the Constitution? Easy, easy, easy.
Yeah, their political message, like all the whole thing of their political message, won't make it that far. That's why I said Nick Fuentes will have a limit on how many people he could, like, I guess they call them like groypers or some shit like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, the gripers.
Yeah, and but they are what they are gonna do is they're gonna tear down those fucking like fake political personalities like Kirk,
Right.
like Candace Owens, like Trump. I think even Trump is gonna be torn down. They're gonna hold their nose and vote for him.
Yeah,
But
but you see that with like you said, the Fuenteses and they slowly see, because remember, like when Trump moved the capital to Jerusalem, or not the capital, when he
the
moved the
embassy,
embassy to Jerusalem.
yeah,
Oh man, did the alt right hate that? Because there's a left and right perspective on the state of Israel, the banking
yeah,
community, who just happens to be made up of Jewish folks in the Jewish community. If
hmm
they were, if it was made up of African Americans or Mexicans or Hispanics, at least I would still take that leftist criticism of it because it's banking. So who the fuck,
yeah,
like the banking is such a like gross world in my opinion. So yeah, of course, but the
yeah,
right takes a more like heavier, different tone to it, right? But when that happened, you saw like the tearing down begin of like Trump, right?
yeah. The Israel stuff, yes, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
And
the whole.
they should have known already. I understood that. Like, oh, this is probably gonna be one of the most pro-Israel presidents we've ever had.
And it's funny because you see like Emma Vigeland putting out tweets and stuff of like, this is so anti-Semitic. We have a president who's super anti-Semitic. It's like, I looked at that and I laughed and I was like, he literally moved the embassy to Jerusalem, like fucking physically, like,
He declared the Golan Heights as Israel's territory. That's a chunk of Syria that
yeah,
he
and
just said, "Oh, that's Israel's now." It's like
exactly.
what?
And just because he made like a bad joke or two, like at the fucking this like Israeli thing, they're like, oh, clutch their pearls, like, oh my god, you know what I mean? And it's like, no, look at his policies, man. They're super pro-Israel. They're super like, you know, like cutting taxes. That's a super pro banker, pro APAC, pro lobbyists. That's
Yeah,
that's what they want. That's the agenda that they want to pass. But and that okay, so that kind of speaks to like the Middle East stuff, right? Like we saw that there was this Afghanistan thing that happened where there's, I think it was like the Washington Post or somebody had this long legal battle trying to get documents that showed like General Petraeus and them uh
hmm
basically like in email conversations like what the fuck are we doing here again, like what is this supposed to be all about, like you
yeah,
know what I mean, like what's our goal again here in Afghanistan. So again, I want to try to phrase this in a more like moral, philosophical like perspective.
yeah,
And one of the approaches I take to that is globalism, right? Our interventionism,
Hmm.
competing for natural resources around the world. There's got to be a loser. That whole process, right? That most modern countries have accepted and have decided to kind of play. So I think, well, we entered Afghanistan with one goal in mind: go get Osama bin Laden. He was supposedly the perpetrator of 9/11, right? We can get into that
Yeah.
conspiracy stuff if you want, but like we know that like, according to these intelligence agencies, right? That's what was going on. So we went in there, tried to do like this strategic strike. He got away, whatever, and we said, oh well, the Taliban facilitated him. Never mind the fact that 15 out of the 19 hijackers were Saudi Arabian nationals. No, we're going to
Hmm.
ignore the Saudi Arabians because, we're allies. So we're not going to go after them, even though their citizens were the ones that carried out the attack. But we're going to point the finger at the Taliban because they attacked us. So never went into Afghanistan with a strategy. And now we're sticking around. And just to kind of throw this over to you, my thing is I think we're sticking around for the minerals in the mountains. China has, been able to successfully get a lot of the mineral stuff that goes into the iPhones, that goes into the cell phones and producing them and everything like that. So it speaks to that larger natural resource, morality of like countries and autonomy. And what's your perspective that you bring into like just these endless things and all of that?
Boy,
I know that's a lot.
yeah. uh, I'm sure as far as the higher ups, like the guys who make these decisions to go into these places, I definitely think it's resource based, territorial based. As far as like we planted our flag here, thus
Right.
we control this territory strategically, so that we have a foothold somewhere in case something happens or and whatnot. They call it U.S. interest, air quotes.
It's like the
You know,
banana republics.
yeah. uh, as far as the people underneath, like, you know, you go as far as like when 9/11 happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was basically used as, a way for the Bush administration to say, we can basically go anywhere in the world with this war. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's anywhere in the Middle East, actually. And they're
Right.
like, what'll give us the best strategic position for either resources or military footholds to dominate the region, essentially. And they
That's true.
basically use 9/11 for that. So for me, even though I'm not an expert on foreign policy or politics or anything,
Right. We're just
I look
speculating.
at I look at the psychological aspect to that of how people, you know, basically conditioned into
Mm-hmm.
responding this way using fear, right?
Right.
Like if it like a dog is I don't know, chewing your shoes. If you
Yeah.
beat the crap out of him with a belt,
Yeah. He's he's
every
gonna he's gonna fear that. Yeah.
so now we have this, I think it was implanted subconscious fear of like Islamic culture, Arab culture, Muslims,
Yep.
and they use
For
that to be able to
decades.
say, well, this Assad guy here in Syria, we know what the Middle East is, right? A bunch of scary people with bombs and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we got to go over there. He's hurting his own people. We got to go over there and help them.
Yeah.
It's
It's like, yeah, just how we helped Iraq, right, and
yeah.
Afghanistan. But
It-
it also speaks to surveillance, right? It touches because that kind of fear mongering and the way we went about it. For one, it exposed, like you said, it's this like, well, the top brass wants like these resources, Banana Republic style, like strategic. Like, well, if we're not there, Russia's gonna be there, so we have to
yeah,
be there first. We're
yeah,
kinder, so better us than them.
yeah,
And forget about their autonomy or whatever. But then it also, like, the Patriot Act, right? It was passed, and then the fucking Democrats, recently reauthorized it. It was gonna
hmm
expire. All they
hmm
had to do was just fucking sit on their hands and not do anything. But they're like, nah, fuck it. Give Trump this. He's an existential threat, and we're trying to impeach him, and that's the narrative we're singing to the American people. But in the back door, in the rooms, we're gonna slide him over some more powers.
yeah, and that works two ways. See, I did a video on that, but I focused on the Trump end of it as like a lot of Trump fans will come to me and say, "Well, George Bush was a war criminal and he's a neocon." I'm
Yeah.
like, Look what Trump's doing with you just signed the signed the Patriot Act with obviously with these Democrats with these Democrats. Uh, the white helmets in Syria, the
Right.
bombing of Syria without evidence. It's
Right.
like it's like come on guys, wake up. Like wake up. I'm sure people already understood that there's a lot of Democrats that are like that are establishment essentially. I don't think like AOC, Ilhan Omar. I don't think they signed that thing, right?
I don't think they did, but I didn't hear much like pushback against it either. If I was a fucking Dem like that, I'd be like, these motherfuckers
Yeah,
are going against everything that they want you to believe they stand for. Here's a fucking list of all everything that's been happening. And this is why I'm disappointed in Bernie sometimes because I mean, for whatever you think of Tulsi Gabbard, you know that she's willing to like buck, orthodoxy and, damn the consequences. She's just going to fucking go out there, like, even if
yeah.
it
She'll
tanks
just
her
say it.
polls or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah,
she'll just say it. So I wish Bernie would do that because, like, Hillary Clinton came out on that Howard Stern thing, right?
yeah,
And basically like ran him through the ringer, just like, oh fuck Bernie, that motherfucker, yeah, he crossed me, fuck him, we're all thug life over here, he ain't about it, like gangster style. Went on the Howard Stern show and just like, and then Howard Stern, do we hate Bernie Sanders now?
oh yeah,
It's like, bro. And then you know what's funny is that like Bernie came out with a response a little bit, right? But I didn't think like it lived up to like the the attack that Hillary did on him. For one, 2016 rigging. For two, just bad mouthing his ass. Like up and down like the mainstream media. Like
Well, what did Bernie say? Because I didn't hear it.
Well, he kind of he condemned it. To be honest with you, I haven't like seen the like the official thing that he said. I've just kind of heard like that he called her out or whatever. So I can't even speak to what he said. I'd have to
Yeah,
look that up. But I know that it was like, I don't know if people in the live chat can drop something, but I know he responded to it. But just knowing Bernie's history, like I doubt it was like forceful or like,
yeah. It
but
was probably very meek, you know.
right, very like, well, Hillary Clinton, I respect her and like she's my friend, but
Not the queen of all warmongers or
yeah, not
whatever.
not to the level of Queen of Warmongers, but yeah, it's I I don't know if maybe Bernie's just trying to be strategic or what. Like he knows that he needs to keep this like Democratic Party like taped together enough to where all the coalitions will parts of them will
Yeah,
like come with him and like implement his ideologies and what his philosophy is as far as like what we should do about these problems.
yeah,
But I mean, you're seeing, so there's this other story about Warren, right? Like you're seeing Warren really chip away at her, and Warren is an interesting case. Like I know that you said that there are some people who follow Warren who are progressives, right? Who are like,
yeah. They mean well, you
yeah,
know.
that they mean well and stuff like that. But what do you think attracts them to Warren? What's your take on Warren? Where do you think what do you think she's trying to do, and what she's trying to like, what her like, I don't know, what's
Yeah.
her deal?
Well, this might be unpopular considering like your audience and my audience would probably think this is unpopular to say, but part of me thinks that Elizabeth Warren means well.
Mm-hmm.
And what the problem is her strategy for doing good, in her opinion, is uniting the Democratic Party and merging both sides of the progressive wing and the establishment wing. I think that's what she thinks is like, this is the good thing to do. We'll get things done because we'll all be working together. And it's like, it's just a stupid, stupid strategy. And me and James will say this like little theory
Mm-hmm.
about one of our favorite movies, The Dark Knight,
Uh-huh.
the Batman movie, The Dark Knight.
Oh yeah, I love those.
And we'll look at a newer movie like, Batman versus Superman. And we're like, guys, if you took your time to really write out a really good movie, you'll still make shitloads of money.
Yeah.
So I don't know why you're like pumping out fast food films to make a quick buck when you can sit down, take your time, and make this extravagant fucking movie. And I look at that in regards to politics and Elizabeth Warren. Why are you taking these like half measures, right?
Yeah.
You can get real support if you stuck by like something like Bernie's doing, where he has a solid policy and he's like, I'm staying with it no matter what. Like that's how you gain
So
large
the Dark
followings.
Knight would be like a Bernie and the.
Let's not go there.
Oh, okay, okay.
Dark Knight's like my favorite movie of all time. I don't want to.
You don't
I don't
want
want
to
to muddy the
associate.
waters.
Yeah, you don't want to
Yeah.
muddy the waters. All right, all right. We won't go there, but I can see your larger point, right? Where it's like almost like a quick like reactionary thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, what's like what the polls say? What do the poll like? A lot of
Yeah.
politicians do that, not just Elizabeth Warren, but there's a lot of politicians who stick to that, like Harris, right? I'm gonna glue myself to this Medicare for all because right now it's like really popular. And then when the mainstream media launched its, well, not just the mainstream media, but like the pharmaceutical companies, the special interests in in healthcare,
Yeah.
when they launched out this massive anti-campaign, you started seeing a lot of people like start becoming more centristy and everything like that. So it's like, But then you also sympathize with like a Warren, because look, I'm not for Warren, but I can see this holding the establishment wing, holding the progressive wing together, because at the end of the day, you want to do what's best for people, right? And if you have to just walk this thin line, and it's okay, you're going to get pushback from either end, you got to at the end of the day do what's right. But I don't know if Elizabeth Warren's genuinely trying to do that. Like, I don't, just me personally, I don't trust her.
Oh, I'm willing to hear that argument because I'm not like strict with that, with saying that Warren is she just means well, but she's dumb. I'm not going like I'm saying. Oh, she could definitely just be another establishment shill type person.
Obama-esque, yeah.
Yeah, she could easily be that. I'm not saying she's I know she's genuine. I don't know that.
Right.
I'm just this is me just essentially guessing from a distance.
Right. And especially like maybe what people see, like some progressives see that in Elizabeth Warren, and they can kind of, oh well, I genuinely trust people. I genuinely think people are genuine. So, what's wrong with her trying to? So yeah, like just to put it in that perspective of like potential voters, and separating yourself from the whole politics situation. There's a legitimacy to what she's trying to do, in the sense that like people, trusting people at least, or people who don't know better, whatever you want to say. That's what I like. I look at it like, oh, they that's what she's trying to like paint. Like that's the product she's trying to put out, and of course she's going to get some support.
They might recognize her as like, oh, you're like a pragmatic version of Bernie Sanders.
Exactly.
Right? That might be their thoughts of why they're supporting Warren. They're like, oh, Bernie, I like Bernie. He has these great ideas, but you got to be practical about it. And Elizabeth Warren knows how to be practical. She knows how to talk to the establishment and the progressives. I think that's a dumb reason. I'm more of an all-out, full-on, use your conscience no matter what type guy, but they might be thinking in strategy for why they support Warren over like Bernie or Tulsi or Yang or anybody.
Yeah, very true, very true. So yeah, I mean, just to kind of get into a philosophical type of thing, I know that. So can you explain to me, like, okay, so you like the philosophy stuff, that's kind of what you're attracted to more in relation to politics. What are some like issues that you think that people don't pay attention to, that that kind of touch on that philosophical perspective?
Well, I don't know if you're like a film guy. Have you ever seen The Matrix?
Yes.
And there's this little saying on top of the doorway when Neo walks in to meet the
Oracle.
What's her name? Oracle. Yeah. basically says, know thyself. I think those are some of the most important words that anyone could hear.
Do
And
you, do you feel like people don't know themselves?
yeah, I mean, it's a process. It's not just, I like, I know my name, I know where I work, I know my favorite, baseball team. It's a lot more of knowing your own psyche.
Right.
Like, if you look into someone like Carl Jung and you're like, oh, what is the ego? It doesn't mean you're a boastful person who thinks they're better than everyone. Like, no, it's an actual psychological aspect, just
Now,
like the subconscious and all that.
well, can there be a difference between knowing yourself and identifying with certain things that talk to who you are? So when people say, well, boom, I'm a big sports